When The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time released on the Nintendo 64 in late 1998, one thing seemed clear to gamers. Zelda was now a 3D series. As the years progressed, new console entries in the Legend of Zelda series followed this style. 2D entries of the franchise were limited to Nintendo's Game Boy Color. In late 2002, with Nintendo of America gearing up for the launch of the Wind Waker in North America, a smaller release in the franchise made its way to the Game Boy Advance in the middle of the holiday shopping season. From the outside, it looked like a simple port of the Super Nintendo classic A Link to the Past, but that only told half the story. Included on the cartridge, and taking up a starring role on the front of the box, was a brand new type of Zelda adventure. Unlike past titles, this added quest wasn't a personal journey through the Hylian countryside. It was a multiplayer dungeon crawler that focused on cooperation and communication between players to solve puzzles, defeat enemies, and, as always, rescue the Princess Zelda. But in a strange turn of events, this simple side mode developed by Flagship became the focus of the Zelda series for the next several years, all of which culminated with the only 2D Zelda title to appear on dedicated home consoles following the series' jump to 3D. The Aonuma era continues with the story of The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords and 4 Swords Adventure. Following the release of the Oracle games on the Game Boy Color in 2001, the handheld side of the Legend of Zelda series was firmly in the hands of Flagship, a subsidiary of Capcom. The Oracle titles were a huge hit, despite releasing so close to the launch of the Game Boy Advance, and the team back at Flagship was eager to get started on their next project. Development on a new Zelda for the Game Boy Advance was at the top of the team's priority list, but back at Nintendo, they had something else in mind. The Game Boy Advance's more powerful hardware made ports of Super Nintendo, Genesis, and even some PlayStation games possible on the small system, and nothing was more appealing than Nintendo's backlog of classic SNES titles, many of which were already a decade old by the time the GBA dropped. Within Nintendo's Zelda team, Yoichi Yamada was directing a port of A Link to the Past for the system, with Zelda veteran Takashi Tezuka serving as producer. Unlike other ports of the era, Nintendo wanted to add a little bit more to this GBA port. Nintendo turned to Flagship to develop a multiplayer mode for the upcoming title, and work on a full Zelda game for the GBA was put on hold. At E3 2002, Nintendo officially unveiled A Link to the Past for the GBA and a new game called 4 Swords alongside it. During Nintendo's press conference, Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto unveiled the new multiplayer mode on stage with a live demo. Accompanying him were members of the audience, specifically other game industry developers and executives. The game was playable on the show floor, with many being impressed with the additional mode. Like other Game Boy Advance games of the time, 4 Swords required each player to not only have a Game Boy Advance console, but also a copy of the game and a link cable to connect the systems. With the game supporting up to 4 players, the multiplayer mode was well received at the show, with many likening it to classics like Gauntlet. Just a few months later, in December 2002, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and 4 Swords was released on the Game Boy Advance. Most of the attention was put on the portable port of A Link to the Past, but love for the multiplayer mode didn't go unnoticed. In reviews of the titles, critics praised the multiplayer. IGN's Craig Harris encouraged players to check out the mode in his review, citing it as a must-play, and one of the best System Link games on the Game Boy Advance. 4 Swords wasn't a tacked-on multiplayer mode. It was a full adventure, taking place before the events of Ocarina of Time. At release, this made 4 Swords the earliest game in the Legend of Zelda timeline. The adventure starts with Link and Zelda approaching the 4 Sword, a powerful weapon with an evil creature sealed within. The creature breaks free from the sword and reveals itself to be Vaddie, a black spirit with a singular eye. Vaddie captures Zelda with intentions of wedding the princess, and flees from Link. 3 fairies then approach Link, encouraging them to pick up the 4 Sword and use it to seal Vaddie away once again. However, upon retrieving the sword, Link is split into 4 individuals, all conveniently wearing different colored tunics with matching hats. Link then sets out on an adventure to find the 4 great fairies, locate Vaddie's palace, and free the princess from the creature's attempts at matrimony. The gameplay of 4 Swords is incredibly similar to A Link to the Past and other 2D Zelda titles. There are 4 dungeons players have access to. Each dungeon featured 3 randomized levels, with the third and final level featuring a boss battle. Puzzles and enemies appeared in the dungeon based on the number of players present, with groups of 2, 3, or 4 people able to play the game together. The game's focus was primarily on having players complete challenges together, but other features of the game incentivized more competitive play. For example, the player who collected the most rupees during a level is awarded a special prize. If collecting rupees wasn't your style, you could try to be the first to reach the end of a level. Doing so awarded the player with a heart container, increasing their total life. It wasn't the main course by any means, but the impression Four Swords left on gamers was fairly positive. For the people who could get it set up, Four Swords was a unique, multiplayer-focused Zelda adventure and unlike anything else on the game's market. But back at Nintendo, they were brewing a strange take on the franchise, with a title that ran with the best of Four Swords ideas. In early 2003, with development of Four Swords over, Flagship returned to developing an original Zelda outing on the Game Boy Advance, but Nintendo wasn't ready to let the series rest just yet. Back at the Zelda team within Nintendo EAD, they had just finished up their own project, the critically acclaimed The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. With several ideas and concepts being developed at the time, one title managed to make its way to the top. Based on the Four Swords mode developed by Flagship, the team at Nintendo EAD began crafting their own take on the formula. But rather than focus on the Game Boy Advance, the team wanted to use the connectivity options between the Game Boy Advance and their home console, the Nintendo Gamecube. At E3 2002, Zelda once again made an appearance with series creator Shigeru Miyamoto taking the stage during Nintendo's press conference. After highlighting some upcoming titles coming to the Nintendo Gamecube, Miyamoto revealed a new Four Swords game being made exclusively for the system. While it didn't feature a full on-stage demo like the previous year, Four Swords on Gamecube was given a brief overview and highlight reel during Miyamoto's portion of the conference. A new feature in the trailer showcased the connectivity the game offered to the Game Boy Advance. While playing the game on a TV screen through the Nintendo Gamecube, players could enter homes, caves, or other structures. Upon entering, the player's view shifted to the Game Boy Advance's screen. Not only did this give players more freedom when adventuring, but it could also give the Game Boy Advance owners a reason to pick up Nintendo's struggling GameCube. At Nintendo, the game's development was progressing smoothly, although the game would suffer from a slight delay in the lead up to release. Shigeru Miyamoto and Eiji Aonuma both served as producers on the project, with directorial duties being handled by Toshiaki Suzuki. Suzuki, best known today as the producer of the Mario Party series, was a veteran of Nintendo's handheld scene. After joining the company in the mid-90s, Suzuki's first few projects revolved around developing titles for Nintendo's Satellaview, a Japanese exclusive add-on to the Super Famicom. Suzuki made a name for himself at the end of the 1990s by directing a trio of games for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. After helping with GBA connectivity during the development of The Wind Waker, Suzuki led day-to-day development of this new Four Swords title. Following the game's reveal, more news about the release slowly trickled out. In late 2003, Nintendo revealed that Four Swords for GameCube was coming out in February 2004 in Japan, alongside additional game modes. Four Swords for GameCube became Hyrulean Adventure. Tetris Trackers, another multiplayer-focused title revealed at E3 2002, was bundled with the game, alongside a new mode called Shadow Battle. The complete package was retitled Four Swords Plus in response. Outside of Japan, there was some confusion regarding the release, as Nintendo of America initially planned to release Hyrulean Adventure and Tetris Trackers, later named Navi Trackers in North America, as separate releases. However, localization work was only completed on Hyrulean Adventure and Shadow Battle, leaving Tetris Trackers as a Japanese exclusive. On March 18, 2004, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Plus was released in Japan. Reviews in the region were generally positive, with Famitsu awarding the game a 33 out of 40. Sales, however, were considerably lower than previous Zelda games. Across the entire country, the game managed to sell only 127,000 copies, a far cry from the success of The Wind Waker just a little over a year ago. North America came next in the release schedule. On June 7, 2004, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventure was released on the Nintendo Gamecube. Alongside a copy of the game, players were also given a GameCube to Game Boy link cable, normally a separate purchase. Upon release, the game received mostly positive reviews. Critics praised the game's use of the Game Boy Advance and GameCube connectivity, and the beefy new adventure the game offered. Praise was given to the game's stellar soundtrack, impressive visual effects, and even the game's story. Some critics pointed to the game's poor quality of graphics, stating the title looked too similar to the Game Boy Advance title that preceded it, and was a far cry from the capabilities of the Nintendo Gamecube. Initial sales in North America were average, with the game selling over 150,000 units during its debut month, making it the third best-selling game in June 2004. Four Swords Adventure utilized a unique, albeit complicated setup to play. The standalone release of Four Swords Adventure included the software needed to play through the game and the included Game Boy to GameCube link cable. In single player, this was all you would need, but to get the most out of this Zelda adventure, you would have to invest a few more rupees. In multiplayer, each player is required to use the Game Boy to GameCube link cable and a Game Boy Advance to control the player. This means for a full party of 4 to play, you'll need a GameCube, 4 Game Boy Advance consoles, 4 Game Boy to GameCube link cables, and the software itself. But if you could somehow manage it, Four Swords Adventure was unlike any other gaming experience on the market. Four Swords Adventure once again sees Link protecting the titular Princess Zelda. After a series of strange events, Zelda opens a portal that leads to the Four Swords Sanctuary. Shadow Link appears, threatening the princess and her shrine maidens. Shadow Link seals the shrine maidens in crystals and escapes into the portal, fleeing into the sanctuary. With no other options, Link reaches for the Four Sword, splitting themselves into 4 once again. Upon obtaining the Four Sword, however, Link inadvertently unleashes Vaati upon the land of Hyrule once again. Vaati sets out on a reign of destruction across Hyrule, leading the 4 Links to team up to stop the evil creature once again and save the princess. Of the 3 game modes, Hyrulean Adventure serves as the main story mode, with a total of 8 worlds, each consisting of 4 stages, with a final stage in each world featuring a boss battle for the quartet of Links to fight. Like the original Four Swords release, players team up to complete levels, defeat enemies, and solve puzzles. Four Swords Adventure was sold as a cooperative experience, but solo players didn't have to sweat too much. When playing the game alone, a player could control all 4 versions of Link and play through the entire game mode. Unlike the more cooperative focus of Hyrulean Adventure, Shadow Battle focused on player versus player gameplay. 2 to 4 players could jump into the mode and duke it out, until only the final player remained. Navi Trackers, however, was a completely unique experience. Rather than battle or go off on an adventure, players were tasked with helping locate the members of Tetra's pirate crew. The TV screen was used to showcase the game map, with Tetra providing help to the players. On the Game Boy Advance screen, players searched for pirates to collect in-game stamps. Like Hyrulean Adventure, Navi Trackers was playable alone or against a computer opponent, represented by series icon Tingle. For those across the Atlantic, or in the land down under, the wait for Four Swords Adventure was a little longer than normal. Localization work on the title was completed before the end of 2004, but the games weren't released in Europe until January 2005. The 7-month difference between European and American releases can be attributed to the launch of the Nintendo DS. When the system launched in late 2004 in North America and Japan, many Game Boy Advance games were pushed to 2005 to avoid cannibalizing sales. Europe didn't receive the new handheld until 2005, and Nintendo of Europe opted to continue releasing Game Boy Advance games in the region throughout late 2004, many of which weren't out in Japan or North America yet. Because of this, Flagship's original Zelda game was released in the region for holiday 2004, pushing Four Swords Adventure out of the coveted holiday slot. Four Swords Adventure was released across Europe on January 7, 2005. Australia was the final region to receive the game when it came out 4 months later on April 7th, bringing an end to Four Swords Adventure's year-long launch around the world. In the years following Four Swords and Four Swords Adventure, Nintendo seemed like they were interested in continuing the Four Swords line of titles. The Minish Cap, the next entry in the series, served as a prequel to the original Four Swords, and there were even plans to create a Four Swords title for the Nintendo DS, but this title was never released, with Nintendo opting to develop an original Zelda game for the handheld. Four Swords has been re-released once since its original cartridge outing. On September 28, 2011, Nintendo released Four Swords Anniversary Edition on Nintendo DSiWare and on the 3DS eShop as a free download to celebrate the Legend of Zelda series' 25th anniversary. The enhanced port was developed by Grezzo and included a handful of quality of life updates. New areas and a new hero mode were included with the release. The biggest addition, however, was the ability to play the game solo for the first time ever. Sadly, the release was short-lived. On February 20th, 2012, Nintendo pulled the game from the eShop, ending the anniversary promotion. It was available again during 2014, although briefly. Players were able to download the game again from January 30th to February 2nd, although this was only for 3DS models, as DSiWare had been discontinued by Nintendo. Four Swords Anniversary has remained delisted since then, with Nintendo stating no intentions to return to the game or the Four Swords style of gameplay. Sadly, Four Swords Adventure suffered a far worse fate. The game has never been re-released since it came out on the Nintendo Gamecube, making it only one of 2 Zelda titles that are only available on a single console. And that's a shame. Four Swords Adventure is one of the most unique and frankly brilliant games in the franchise. Personally, I've never been able to experience as much of this game as I wanted. I've played some portions of the game single player, but I missed out on playing the game at release, and I haven't been able to set up a multiplayer session of the title in the years since. With the rising cost of retro Nintendo hardware and my lack of Game Boy Advances, it's hard to say when I'll finally get to experience the way this game was meant to be played. To me, that's sitting around an old CRT TV with a GameCube, 4 Game Boy Advances, copy the game spinning in a disc tray while you hang out with your friends. Or maybe Nintendo will just re-release the game on modern hardware. If you ever get the chance, whether on the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo Gamecube, or even the 3DS, don't miss out on the opportunity to play this multiplayer Zelda with your best buddies. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and share this video on your favorite social media sites. In the comments, let me know your thoughts on Four Swords and Four Swords Adventure. Have you ever played the game with 3 other people at once, or do you have any other memories regarding the games? Subscribe to catch the next video as soon as it releases. In the next part, we're sticking exclusively to Nintendo's Game Boy Advance with Flagship's final entry in the series, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap.